From the Asgard Company Studios in beautiful Wichita Falls, Texas, from the finest mind in the modern fitness industry, the one true voice in the strength and conditioning profession, the most important podcast on the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, starting Strength Radio.
Welcome to Starting Strength Radio. We're here every Friday with very, very important things to say to you. And if you have problems understanding that these are very, very important things, that's your problem, not ours. Because everything we tell you is terribly important. And this is a good example of it. We're here this week with Stan Efferding. We're going to talk to Stan quite a while about lots and lots of different things. But first, comments from the haters. All right, these are especially good this week. These are all coming in as a result of the they're a variety of things. Like Gene Mean says, this is in response to the How to Deadlift video. I ripped my toe once. I was running barefoot through the yard and ripped it on the edge of the sidewalk. I wonder how Mark ripped his toe. Gene, you realize that's the first time I've ever heard that? Man, I'm surprised that in my 63 years, no one else has ever thought of how that, little play on my last name could be so significantly hurtful to me. All right, Rippetoe, this is about Olympic lifting. Can you tell me why, there's two H's in front of why, you feel like you are entitled to an opinion on Olympic lifting when you are just a fat, milk-drinking Texas who never achieved anything in Oli lifts? It's so good.
You gotta do this, Stan.
Oh, God. Yeah, you need to start. You need to start doing the same thing. It's just too much fun.
I've got some great ones.
Yeah, the bottom 3% will type anything on YouTube.
My entire podcast would just be this.
Oh yeah, you need to start with 3 or 4 of them just to share the fun with all these other fucking people. I like the part with the 2 H's before the why, because Yankees pronounce this why. Why is a letter of the alphabet. Watt is a unit of energy. Where is the thing before a wolf, right? That's like a shape changer designation. What else? Where, what, why, when. When is what you do at the casino. When you go up to win your rent at the casino. Right? That's what win is. So y'all just, take your H's and shove them up your ass. I've coached a 900 deadlifter who couldn't power clean 265. So good luck with your deadlifting. Conclusive proof that strength has nothing whatsoever to do with the Olympic lifts. Never Enough says, this guy needs some functional training and some knowledge on nutrition too, spelled T-O. And our famous, very popular, why are Mark's nipples hard? Is he some kind of pervert? I can't get enough of that. I read that every week. It's just so fucked up. Oh, God. So, that concludes this week's episode of Comments from the haters. And we put reverb behind that, so it sounds real dramatic.
It's fantastic.
Cool. Oh, God. Stan, thank you for being here, man. Stan was doing a seminar in Fort Worth this weekend, and we asked him to drive up to Wichita Falls, which is what we take as a tremendous favor, because driving to Wichita Falls is always a pain in the ass, especially if you're already in Dallas. Or Fort Worth, but it doesn't take but an hour and a half to drive down there. So Stan's here. We appreciate it. Stan.
Appreciate the invite. Thank you.
Absolutely. Stan is one of our favorite people in this industry. He's an honest man, which is rare in this particularly fucked up industry. He only deals with facts. He only deals with things he absolutely knows to be true. He does not bullshit anyone, and we like his meals. Stan is the originator of the vertical diet, and his company, X Elevate, is look these people up online. They sell frozen, prepackaged meals for a very reasonable price. It's cheaper to eat there than to go out and eat. The monster mash with potatoes is my favorite. It warms up in about 6 minutes in the microwave, and you can eat it every day. You don't get tired of it. It's good. How did you come up with this idea, Stan? Because this is brilliant. I mean, we are going to put these, when we get enough gyms to do it, put these things in the gym in a little freezer and sell them out of the gyms, because I'm convinced this is a good idea. A damn good idea.
Yeah, I'll give you the long story as long as we're here talking about it.
We got time.
I'll give you the long story. And, to be honest, my grandfather used to call it shit on a shingle. So it's not like I invented
It's like cream chip beef on toast kind of.
It's been around for a long, long time. Stan didn't invent beef and rice.
No.
But I did trademark Monster Mash.
Yeah.
So I am kind of the inventor.
You haven't had any trouble with the song, people?
Not yet, no. They didn't.
I'm sorry I brought that up.
Yeah. But I'll tell you kind of...
That's probably a good idea.
Kind of how it came together, to be honest, is many, many years ago, I had a surgery for sleep apnea. I had the uvula lasered off, right? Which didn't fucking work.
No.
I still want to get
Never does.
Nope.
I know
never
3
works.
or 4 people have tried that, and it doesn't help.
But it's the most miserable experience, because they actually just burn off your uvula, and so
you got a
roof
big
of your throat has a
third-degree burn in the back of your throat.
Yes, and it goes on for like 2 weeks. You can hardly eat or drink anything. So I was originally using 2% milk, and I put it in one of those sports bottles that has the tube that you can squirt into the back of your throat.
Right.
So I could kind of bypass the whole swallowing thing for the roof of the mouth. And after a while, I figured I needed to get some more nutrients. I didn't want to lose weight, of course. This was many years ago when the scale meant everything. And so I took a look at. I remembered that Derek Poundstone's chicken shake. Remember how he used to take boiled chicken and put it in water and blend it?
I heard about that a long time ago, but I thought, what kind of an insane person would drink a water slurry of blended chicken? That's just you got to be pretty damn serious.
I tried it once.
Yeah.
Once.
Yeah. Did it stay down?
Yeah, no. I got about 1 or 2 drinks into it and choked it back up. So it was horrendous. I do know that that other people have tried it. Maybe they have better luck than I do. But so I thought, well, maybe if I ground up, this is crazy, but if I ground up beef and mashed it up and mixed it with bone broth, of all things, I could create a slurry that I could then squirt through a squirt bottle. This probably sounds terrible. I turned this into a very successful meal prep business. It started out of a squirt bottle, a Gatorade bottle with a hose. And I thought if I put all that together, maybe I would be able to get that far enough to the back of the throat that it wouldn't hurt the lining of my mouth. And I was able to manage to get something put together and mashed up in such a way that I could more easily eat it with less pain.
Right.
And what I noticed was, and I think particularly it was because of the bone broth, as in retrospect, but also because of the beef was so finely ground, my digestion significantly improved.
Right.
And I had always struggled with digestion problems. My trigger was vegetable oils, which once I took those out, I had
just not good for you.
Not good for you. And so I just noticed that my regularity was excellent. I wasn't bloated at all. I felt great. And so
more surface area available to your gut. So
absolutely,
makes perfect sense.
Yep. And so when the throat healed, I just included this mash. Of course, I didn't make it such that you could squirt it out of a bottle anymore, but I now would make beef patties or bison patties, and I would grind them, and I would put a little bit of, I'd just mash them up and put a little bone broth in there, and I might mix in some scrambled eggs. I might mix in a little spinach and peppers. I might and just
various
make a meal.
versions of it, sure.
And everything subsequently kind of became a mash. And it traveled well, too. I was able to put these mashes into thermos and keep them hot for many, many hours. When I was traveling, I could always have the meal I wanted to eat.
All right.
I wasn't eating airport food, and I wasn't eating room service or pizzas, etc. when I was traveling a lot. So, and it was always just so good on my stomach. I also noticed that I was able to eat more of it more often, which for a powerlifter or a strong man or somebody who has to take in a lot of calories without having all the associated bloating, etc. So, I utilized that with my athletes, obviously with Hafthor, who was somebody who being north of 400 pounds, had to put down a lot of food. And same with Brian Shaw, and these guys had a lot of digestion problems, much like I did throughout my career when I bulked up to over 300 pounds. And one of the hardest things to do is get enough calories, and to do it without all of the adverse effects, all the diarrhea and bloating and problems that we just endure because we have to get the calories in. And usually we're chasing pizza, pasta, and pancakes, and I just found that this alternative, this mash with foods that were easier to digest, I incorporated lots of white rice with that, which was easy to digest, didn't give you gas and bloating. I was able to stay hungrier. I was able to eat more. It provided me greater energy. I didn't have the digestion issues. I was regular. All of those things is something that my athletes realized as well, Hafthorne, Shaw, and the rest of the guys. So
ease of digestion is kind of the trick here.
The big thing.
Right.
The big thing.
Especially if you're trying to get 5,000 calories a day. That's hard to do without a lot of fat.
Yeah.
If you're not... The white rice is an interesting... Because all the conventional wisdom is we got to have X amount of fiber every day. But... I think if you're running 5,000 calories of anything through, constipation is probably not a problem.
No.
And irrespective of the amount of fiber you're getting.
Yeah, and I think there's different kinds of fiber. I think some is lower gas than others. I'd make that distinction in the vertical diet, that I'm just really cautious about using low FODMAP foods. Those are those fermentable monosaccharides, the high raffinose foods, the indigestible fibers that gas up a lot in the large intestine. I try and avoid those, and so I do select kind of first and foremost, and this is whether it's for a powerlifter or a strongman. I have Nadia Wyatt, who's competing in the Miss Olympia in a couple of weeks, who's only 115 pounds, uses the exact same diet. And last year she had used a completely different diet, and she has more energy, she's carrying more muscle mass, she's leaner, she has less bloating and gas, she doesn't have the digestion issues. So I really focus on that first, because people, I think, tend to overemphasize the value of fiber to the exclusion of recognizing what its potential downsides are, what certain foods can cause aggravation.
Well, fiber for a sedentary individual is probably, a necessary dietary component, obviously.
Yeah.
You've got to keep things moving. But for an athlete who is already moving way more than they probably need to be, it's getting enough calories, and we can't talk about this enough. I mean, these idiots here don't understand that training that hard requires, if you're going to get recovered, requires 4,000 calories a day at minimum, and for a big man, 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day, and it's a problem.
Yeah.
It's just a problem. They're all thinking about abs.
Yep.
We are thinking about muscle mass and the maintenance of muscle mass and the growth of muscle mass, and it takes a lot of calories, and it becomes a giant problem. The milk for a novice, underweight kid is the best way to get a whole bunch of calories. But for an advanced lifter, an advanced athlete, your approach to this is far better. Far better. An advanced athlete that's already taken in a bunch of calories is not going to be able to add a gallon of milk to the diet and have anything good happen because of all the sugar in the milk.
Yeah.
And
it can be too much depending on the
too
workload.
much to digest.
It can be hard for people to digest that much. And so and for me, everything is definitely individualistic and it's dose dependent. Some people have a harder time digesting particular foods than others, and the quantity matters with just about anything. And so I'm cautious. And then how the foods are prepared. So not only will I try and prioritize the low-gas foods that are easier to digest, but other foods may be able to be prepared in such a way that they create less problems. An example of that might be whether or not you have raw vegetables as compared to cooked. Something, even the cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower, which are high FODMAP, which can cause digestion problems.
They need to be cooked.
Particularly in the quantities that some people recommend them for physique and figure bodybuilding people, just for appetite suppression.
Half a pound of raw broccoli a day is going to be a problem for anyone that's not a cow. But I want to ask you about how you first, how you developed this in your house at the kitchen, and you developed these recipes yourself, right?
Yeah.
How did you do the bone broth?
I just purchased it. I looked and found one that was low in FODMAP. Some bone broths are made with vegetable oil. Some are made with a lot of garlic.
So you bought the bone broth.
So I bought the bone broth.
And added it to the meat and the rice.
Yeah.
It just messed with the quantities and stuff and got it the way you wanted it to taste.
And I thought it was delicious. And so I went to, I partnered with a large, fantastic company that has been in business for 20 years and serves over 4 million meals a year nationwide. And I sat down with their chef and their owner, and we sourced all of the same stuff that I was getting. The bison that I was getting from Costco, which was originally from Great Range out of Colorado. We sourced the original ingredients that I really liked the most, that I had the best luck with, that I enjoyed. Same with the bone broth. We made sure that it was actually boiled bones and not just bouillon cubes and chicken flavoring, etc. And we homemade our own bone broth is what we did, and we cooked everything without any vegetable oils, which is hard to do because a lot of companies that source their food, it comes with the vegetables in the food. Eggs, for instance, is one of them. You usually, on these, for most restaurants, they have a 5-gallon bucket of eggs that they ladle from when they cook food for you. If you go to Denny's or IHOP or anywhere for that matter, they're not cracked eggs. And those eggs that you source, we had a very hard time sourcing eggs that wasn't already cut with canola oil. It was already in there. So we had to find the ingredients that, of course, didn't have the FODMAPs, didn't have the vegetable oils, and we had to prepare them without those things. And they did a fantastic job in creating this. Being an established company with the kind of infrastructure that they had multi-million-dollar German-engineered moisture-controlled ovens. They had a modified atmospheric pressure packaging machine.
Where are they located?
They're in Idaho. Yeah, and they also had flash freezers. So the food would get frozen so fast that it wouldn't get freeze or burn. You wouldn't get the moisture problems. And then, of course, they had great relationships for being able to ship this food nationwide.
We've ordered them here at the gym for months now, and the only trouble we've ever had has not been from Stan, certainly not been from the supplier. It's been from the shipper. Every once in a while, UPS. Now, this is going to sound crazy to you people that deal with UPS. Every once in a while, UPS will fuck something up. I know you've all gotten a package in with the standard toe-shaped dent in the box. We ordered a bunch of meals one time from Stan. They ship Monday and Tuesday. If you order on Friday, they're not going to ship till Monday or Tuesday because they want to get it to you by Thursday. Friday at the latest, and it comes in a very nice, heavy styrofoam container. When that food gets here, I order on Saturday or Sunday. They ship Monday or Tuesday. It gets here Thursday. We get it off of the truck, open it up, and it is frozen, absolutely solid. Do not hesitate to order this because you're afraid it's going to show up thawed out. Now, UPS one time fucked up an order. And the thing that was supposed to be delivered on Thursday got here Monday. And their tracking information said it was delivered on Saturday, and that's a bald-faced lie. It got here on Monday. And we opened it up thinking, this is all going to be spoiled, and it was still mostly frozen. A week after it had been shipped, or 6 days after it had been shipped, is it left the tracking information. These guys, when they say they're going to ship it on Tuesday, it leaves Tuesday. And it showed up mostly partially thawed, and we refroze it, and it was no trouble at all. That's how good the shipping on this stuff is. So don't hesitate to order this if you guys are concerned about having it arrive spoiled. It won't. They've got this down. Order some food from X-Elevate, and you will not. And you know the damnedest thing about this is those Monster Mash with potatoes. The regular Monster Mash with potatoes are something like $10.48 a piece. Is that right?
Yeah, they're different prices for different things.
Well,
yeah.
but the Monster Mash with potatoes is not even $11, and you can't go out and eat lunch in 2019 for $11.
Well, I think that one you're talking about is damn near 900 calories too.
Yeah, it is.
So we provide. That's one of the things that I wanted to do, of course, was be able to provide people more value for their money.
Right.
The cost per calorie.
This is very high quality stuff. And I've always made hamburger meat and rice, and I've always loved it. All my life I've eaten hamburger meat and rice. I've been,
So you invented the vertical diet.
I know a guy that would claim to have done so.
Yeah. on the internet.
Were I in my position.
Yeah. So there you have it. There's the vertical diet infomercial.
Yes. Well, but that's fine. I think it's worth promoting, and I want you to let me know if orders take off after the show airs. So I'll owe you. So I'll understand how big a bill to send you.
Some profit. Here's the big thing, and I've said this before. I did a video about supplements, and I said they were convenient and they taste good, and they're not better than food. And so I'm a food guy. Everybody knows that. I'm the guy that said shakes are for fakes, eat steaks, and that doesn't mean that supplements are worthless. But for the most part, I focus on food, and then making it convenient and taste good. From what all the research says, and it's quite clear that the most successful dieters are those that comply with the diet. So that compliance is the science. And so I just try and make it easier. And we also know from studies and research shows that those people who meal prep have a much higher success rate than those people don't. Whether we prep,
they've spent all that money.
Yes, indeed. But whether we
and by God, they're going to eat it.
Our goal is to get people to prep their meals.
Right.
And I do this, the figure fitness, bikini, bodybuilding industry, they do this really, really well. It's one thing they do well. They do a lot of things quite terribly. But they walk around with Tupperwares all the time.
Right,
and it may seem ridiculous to the general population, but they get success from that because diet is probably 99% of weight loss.
That particular sports.
Yeah. And it's just weight loss in general, just calories in general. People are running around on their treadmills everywhere, not understanding that that's a very small contributor to the overall success rate, and that
utterly useless.
The diet is
you're burning electricity,
critical.
not fat.
Yeah. So, and same with the big guys, the athletes that I train, along with the dieting competitors. Just most of what I've been successful with guys like Hawthorne Shaw is just helping with the logistics, just managing, getting them a meal, that they're easy to digest.
How can I eat 6 times a day?
When they want it, conveniently, especially when they're traveling as much as they do. Because I travel a lot, almost every weekend. I've been in 10 countries and 40 states in the last 18 months. And almost every weekend I'm on an airplane, but I never miss a meal, and I'm always eating the food that I want because I prepared ahead of time. I use my thermos. I throw the frozen meal preps into my checked luggage. I stay at a place with a fridge and a microwave, and I always, on a clock, like I want to, I'm always able to eat the food I want when I want. Right. So then when I go to the gym, I have fantastic training sessions. Right. I don't ever show up tired and underfed and underslept and underhydrated.
Yeah, as everybody that trains when they travel has experienced.
Yeah. Right. Like this morning we trained and I felt fantastic.
Right.
I was fortunate to be able to get that unbelievable lamb last night that you barbecued, which was amazing. Was that a 10-pound chunk of lamb that you put on there?
Probably 5 or 6 pounds.
Yeah. That was incredible.
Lamb ham roast. It was pretty good.
It was outstanding.
Pretty good. If you're lucky one of these days, maybe I'll have you out to eat. But that's. But that's. The fascinating part about training hard is that a lot of us have given ourselves permission to eat just exactly like we want to because we train. I think that's important because I like to eat. I really do. I know I eat a little too much, although I don't eat nearly as much as I used to. Food is important. Food's important to me. Hell, we have scheduled seminars for the express purpose of eating at a restaurant there that we like. My God, we used to go to New Jersey to a CrossFit gym, and it was a pretty good venue, but the reason we went there about 3 times is because across the parking lot from this place, there was a Greek restaurant that just brings tears to your eyes. It's so goddamn good. And it was, so food's always been important to me, and it's been important to a lot of the people we associate with, and we all eat real well. And supplements are easy to get used to, because they're so damn convenient. Now, whey protein is a fine thing to make a shake with if you haven't got time to cook a meal, okay? But I don't use whey protein, and we're selling a whey protein product, but I don't use whey protein if I can eat food. Exactly. Sometimes it's not possible to eat food. Sometimes 100%. You can't leave. Sometimes you have to avail yourself of the convenience of making a whey protein shake. And when you have to do that, the protein needs to be good. It needs to be something you can digest, which means it's whey protein isolate, not concentrate. And it's useful as a supplement. But a lot of people over the past 15, 20 years, the supplement industry has done a marvelous job of normalizing supplements instead of food.
Or beyond that, making it seem as though that's going to give you an added benefit over a meal. And it's certainly never that.
Supplements there's a role for them. We just had our buddy Mike Matthews on 2 or 3 weeks ago. Mike sells some supplements. They're very high quality supplements, but Mike will tell you the same thing. They supplement food.
Yeah.
And I think that a multiple vitamin's a good idea. I've always thought that fish oil's a good idea. I think some vitamin D is probably good for most people to take on a regular basis. But when you start eating bars and drinking shakes instead of food, you've been sold a bunch of bullshit by the people who are selling these products. And I think that's something you need to revisit. Food is the deal, and it should be the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just quantity. I know I work with some large athletes, and I've done bodybuilding and powerlifting for 30 years. But it's also the quality of that food. It's not just quantity, it's quality.
Yes.
And what I find in the dieting industry as a whole, and this is through the competitive dieting industry, bodybuilding, figure physique, bikini, is they tend to over-restrict things. When they start cutting out calories, it cut out entire food groups or maybe even entire macronutrient groups. And I think it has a deleterious effect. I've seen in many cases where people will cut out what did your diet coach always tell you, and most of the people in the industry knows, cut out red meat, cut out dairy, cut out fruit, cut out salt. It's like the first 4 things they knock off the list. And especially for women, when you cut out red meat, well, there goes your iron and your B12.
You are going to suffer from doing it.
You're going to suffer the anemia, and your anemia is going to definitely be one of the problems. And of course, amenorrhea, cessation of the menstrual period, takes place. Then generally they'll tell you not to eat whole eggs. If you eat egg whites.
Egg whites.
Yeah, the biotin's in the egg yolk.
Yes.
Skin, hair, and nails. And the avidin in the egg white will bind to biotin, and if you don't give it to it in the yolk, it's going to take it from your body. So you end up with biotin deficiency, and along with the dieting and the adaptation and the excessive cardio, your thyroid starts to slow because they're not having you salt your food, so you have no iodine if you were using iodized salt. Then your hair starts falling out. And that's tragic for these women who are dieting for these shows. And then they end up at the clinic, and they're getting a shot for iron and B12 and generally D3 as well. So they're replacing what they took out of the diet.
In an industry that purports to represent health,
That's generally what happens.
Yeah.
These people end up becoming deficient in micronutrients, and they have obviously all of the problems associated with that. Plus, the biggest thing about dieting in general, we won't even talk about competitors, And this is any diet. This isn't just the vertical diet, any diet, whether it's paleo or keto or whatever diet you choose. The best diet's the one you'll follow. Just about any diet will provide weight loss. 6 out of 7 people who go on a diet lose weight. But, greater than 90% of them, 95% of them will gain it back. The two main reasons they do that is because they get hungry and they get tired. If you didn't get hungry and tired, you wouldn't need to eat more.
Right.
And they get hungry or tired because they're micronutrient deficient, because they have cravings for sugar when they're really sodium depleted, because they don't get adequate potassium, so they have cravings. They don't get adequate iron or B12, so they have problems with energy. So it's really important that you use the foods that have the most micronutrient density. And even in the studies, when you compare, and this kind of goes on to supplements as well, the supplements don't offer micronutrient density. They don't have the cofactors with the vitamins working together. Even when they study, say, egg white protein against whole egg protein, they see that the whole egg, when you equate for protein and calories, the whole egg, and the presumption is that because of the increased micronutrient density, provide better outcomes. And this study was done on, I think it was men over 60 in particular, but they had both significantly increased muscle mass gains and largely significant increased strength gains as a result, and it was an equivalent protein intake of eating the whole egg. So it's your micronutrients.
I'm paying $1.38 for 18 large eggs at Walmart. $1.38.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is where you live, but eggs are cheap and eggs are good. And I mean, Stan, I don't know about you, but I like to heat up a pan and put some butter in it, like a pretty good little slug of butter in it, and fry 8 eggs until the white gets crispy and brown around the outside.
Yeah.
And
a little over easy, maybe. Keep the yolk a little.
Yeah, keep the yolk. I want the yolk running.
Some people complain that you can oxidize those fats if you cook the yolk too hot, and so it's kind of nice
I
to
want
do
it
it over
running.
easy. And
yeah, just tastes better.
That's kind of the way I choose
My
it.
God, that's good.
It's like nature's multivitamin, that yolk.
Yeah. Egg yolk's a wonderful thing. Egg whites, or I'd just as soon eat packing material. I really would.
Yeah.
Those little styrofoam peanuts. Put a little salt and pepper on those, and they're egg yolks.
Well, we've been sold a bill of goods. Some of it's been because of the bad information that we've got, the stigma against egg yolks and cholesterol, which was historically been just absolutely bad information.
Yes, our friend Ansel Keys.
Yep, and that
destroyed so many lives.
That persevered for over 40 years.
It's still going on. You and I were talking about the ADA the other day, who is still in 2019.
The AHA, American Heart Association.
They do, yeah. And both of those.
The USDA is finally, with their new recommendations, just a couple of years ago, they've finally said, very quietly, this hasn't been much fanfare, that cholesterol in your food is no longer a nutrient of concern, which means there is no upper limit.
Which means there really never was.
No, there never was.
There never was.
No.
And
Procter & Gamble
but
and
the
Kellogg's
American Dietetics Association still wants you to believe that dietary fat causes heart disease.
Yeah.
And it's, there's not ever been a study that's shown that.
No. And even
the long-term studies, Framingham didn't show that.
No, it didn't.
Never did.
No, it didn't. And on the eggs, there's been lots of studies, and I looked deeply into this because I promote eggs for everybody that's on my diet. I suggest that they eat eggs if they can tolerate them. And usually if someone can't tolerate eggs, it's the white that's causing the problem. And if I can get them to separate the white from the yolk, they have better digestion of just the yolk to the exclusion of the white. But there's been some great research. Burn patients, as these studies have been done on burn patients, the more egg yolks they eat, the faster they recover. And
burn patient studies going back 50 years have shown not only that high levels of dietary protein provided by 3 dozen eggs a day.
3 dozen, you're right.
3 dozen
36
eggs a day
was in the study.
Not only promote tissue regeneration much faster than a lower protein diet, but that they have never, ever shown that high a feeding of whole eggs causes an increase in serum cholesterol. It doesn't happen.
Nope.
And we've known that for years and years and years. We've got studies on burn patients that indicate this. And it's just amazing that the popular culture continues to swallow this bizarre lie.
It's especially
about
pervasive,
dietary fat.
especially pervasive in this bodybuilding, figure physique, bikini industry. They'll take the egg yolk out, and then they'll have them put a dollop of peanut butter in for healthy fats. With high polyunsaturates and obviously an incomplete protein. I don't for the life of me understand how that ever happened.
Right.
But it's still
Hydrogenated
today.
vegetable oil.
Yeah.
Look for that ingredient on your peanut butter. Don't eat it if it's on your peanut butter. Don't eat hydrogenated vegetable oil. Do you know what that is? That's Crisco. That's where they take soybean oil and bubble gas hydrogen through it and create essentially an unoxidizable fat product. And it's wonderful if you want to preserve the peanut butter.
Yeah.
But it's not food.
It's not something to eat.
It's not food. Don't eat that.
So I definitely don't have any of that in the diet.
Good.
And
good.
so these are whole foods. And you know what's sad about it is that the vertical diet is what people should be eating, and the only reason that I present it as such is because they're not eating those foods. I, for 30 years, since 1986, have competed in powerlifting and bodybuilding and seen the worst diets and some of the things we talked about and the results, the manifestations of all of these, of the side effects of these diets, particularly in the bodybuilding, figure physique, bikini, with the over-restriction, the metabolic adaptation, now your micronutrient deficiencies. We talked about hair loss and, of course, a lot of muscle loss and anemia and all the rest of those things. But on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the powerlifter guys. And I've done this myself through personal experience many times. I've been up over 300 pounds and dieted down to under 5% body fat to compete in bodybuilding. And both ways I've done wrong many times. I had to learn this lesson personally. We didn't have the internet back when I was in college. Even now that we do have it, I'm frustrated that this isn't more common knowledge and people are still suffering from these problems. But on the other end of the spectrum, we've got the bigger guys suffering from metabolic syndrome. These are the guys using pizza, pasta, and pancakes to get as big as they possibly can. Right. They end up accumulating too much body fat. They end up with fatty liver disease, and then they end up with insulin
which is a
resistance.
disease of sedentary people.
Yeah, and
it can be brought on by diet too.
Too much food. These folks
too much bad food.
Too much bad food.
Bad food.
So that's when Thor came to me 3 years ago. When Hofthor came to me, he said, "Stan, I'm getting fatter. I'm not getting stronger." And that was a concern. And I looked at his weight and his body composition. I think you would be able to easily conclude that he had probably had some of those same symptoms. So we did blood tests, and what we decided is, in order to remedy this, we would diet weight off of him. He was 435 pounds at the time. So we brought him down to 395, and he got quite lean. His blood sugars came down, his HA1C all the way down to 5.1. His fasting glucose was 83, which is really reasonable. His insulin was down under 5. So he was in good shape. His triglycerides came down, which is kind of a leading indicator of fatty liver disease. Fatty liver doesn't necessarily show up in a blood test. AST, ALT, you don't see that. You probably have to get a sonogram to really identify it. Right. And you can be accumulating fatty liver for many years without showing an increase in blood sugars. Probably the first thing you see is the triglycerides pop up, and you'll still have normal blood sugars.
Right.
So you kind of got to keep backing into the equation and see what are the leading indicators and how can I get in front of this. But if it's in existence, then you have to fix it. You got to drop the weight. We introduced choline, which is a really critical nutrient that helps either reverse or prevent fatty liver disease.
Which is present in high levels in egg yolks.
There you go. So you would think, here I get a guy that's got metabolic syndrome, and we're dieting him, but I'm throwing whole eggs at him at the same time. And some people would think to restrict those because they're fatty or they're cholesterol. Cholesterol's not the problem. Fat isn't the problem. Insulin resistance is. So that's what we did. And so we got him where he was starting to he was insulin sensitive again, started to partition nutrients better. And then we started climbing him back up from 395 all the way to over 450. HA1C still at 5.1. Fasted glucose still at 83.
All of his metabolic markers are down normal.
They're all
even
normal.
at the heavier body weight.
Even at the heavier body weight. Because we didn't go back up with pizza, pasta, and pancakes.
Right.
Obviously, we kept the choline in. We did the 10-minute walks after meals. We got a CPAP to remedy some of the sleep apnea, which was a huge cause of a lot of these problems, blood pressure included. And so he was able to get much stronger and get back up to a heavier weight and still partitioning nutrients, still being insulin sensitive. When you get fatty liver, And when you get insulin resistance, the food that you eat just gets stuffed into fat, and it doesn't go to muscle as well as it used to be when you were insulin sensitive.
Right.
So I did this throughout my career. I would diet down, I would bulk up. I would diet down, I would bulk up. What I found, and the reason in retrospect that I think I was able to do so well for so long as I started to improve my diet over time, was because these periods of dieting down resensitized my body.
Yeah.
And then when I would rebound, this rebound effect has long been known for many decades. People talk about the fact that immediately following a bodybuilding show, you can put on a massive amount of weight. But if you do it right, you can also put on a massive amount of muscle.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't just load yourself with ice cream and pizza.
Yeah, you've been catabolic for,
Yes.
unfortunately, for the duration of the lean out.
Yep.
Duration of the cut, you're catabolic.
Yeah.
And suddenly, we've got a whole bunch of growth potential.
Yeah.
Because now we're anabolic again. Without drugs, we're now anabolic as a rebound from the catabolism.
Yeah.
that's
And you're
involved in
insulin
the cut.
sensitive, and you've got great muscle memory. So you're going to get that back really quick. And if you fuel that, then
Right.
you can rebound. So many times throughout my career, as I started to work my way up to being to powerlifting and bodybuilding, I was able to every time I got done with a bodybuilding show, I was able to get an extra 10 pounds onto my powerlifting weight, body weight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would diet back down to a bodybuilding show, and I'd be a little bit heavier than last time. And then I would rebound, and I would be a little bit heavier than last time. And this kept going all the way throughout my career until I'd worked my way up from 140 in college to ultimately competing at 275 in powerlifting and over 300 pounds in the off season.
What was your show weight on stage? The heaviest you ever was.
254, but 1 year prior I was 225 when I had done the over restriction. I had done the egg whites and the chicken breast in 2008 and done some cardio to get ready for the show, lost a ton of muscle tissue, was on stage at 225. Now granted I was meeting a weight class, but I'd never been over 234 on stage prior to 2008. Then I trained with Flex in 2009, and we did it very differently. I didn't do any cardio. I ate almost 4 pounds of steak a day. He had me at times doing up to 600 grams of rice a day because on days that we trained twice a day, we had an incredible workload, white rice. And I was 254 that year, 1 year apart after over 20 years of competing.
muscle.
Now, mind you,
At about the same body fat.
at about the same body fat. I will say that I had lost too much muscle previously. When working with Flex, I held on to a lot more. So it's not like I gained 30 pounds of muscle.
Right.
I definitely did gain
right.
some muscle. But my off-season weight prior to 2008 and 2009 was only different by about 8 pounds.
So your cut involved far less catabolic muscle loss
Yeah.
during those circumstances.
Yeah. And I've tried keto many times throughout my career and always lost a lot of weight and a lot of muscle and got very tired and lost a lot of strength, which I
Right.
think is directly related to muscle loss, of course.
Right.
But with Flex, we didn't do that. I kept carbs in. I took the cardio out.
It has
The wrong
certainly
message.
been my experience that keto is a wonderful way for sedentary people to lose much body weight.
Yeah.
But you can't train on it.
It's really hard to.
Hard
there's
to train
a
on.
small group of people who may become fat adapted, who may benefit in endurance sports in particular. And that, again, that's not all. That's a small part that
They're
can
just
get
real
through
good
adaptation.
oxidizers.
Yes, those folks. But if it's an anaerobic sport, if it's something that requires a lot of force production and strength, then you're going to want those carbs in there for performance. This has been well studied. So this isn't about a keto versus carb diet in particular, but it's about trying to figure
How
out
you apply it to the individual.
yeah, what are what's their goals, you know?
Right.
And even then, if you want to compare a very low carb keto diet to a low carb diet, just for general health for people with insulin resistance,
Right.
they can get equivalent outcomes. But what I find is that the low carb folks can comply with the diet better than the very low carb folks. And this has been studied extensively as well. Compliance on a keto diet is poor. That's the only reason.
Unpleasant.
It's unpleasant, and
It's just
because a
unpleasant.
large percentage of those people don't necessarily adapt or don't even survive the 3 or 4 week adaptation period.
Right.
And if you let them eat ad libitum, if you put them on low carb diets or even a keto diet, and they just leave them alone over the course of the year, they'll creep back up to 150 or 200 grams a day. But if you keep them at, around 100, 150 grams, they can sustain that for a longer period of time. And this is strictly in terms of measuring compliance. This isn't the outcomes. And the outcomes don't seem to be significantly different anyhow, assuming they both maintain a similar calorie deficit. So it's just about whether or not you enjoy the diet. And I've said that many times. The vertical diet really is about something that's simple, sensible, and sustainable. It's compliance is the science. And I don't care what diet you use. You can use vertical with keto. You can use vertical with vegan. I have a whole chapter in there on that because I do get vegan and vegetarian clients. And my concern is, are you doing that as best as you can to optimize your health? Are you getting your iron supplement? Are you getting your B12 supplement? Do you have adequate HCl pepsin in your stomach to be able to digest and absorb the nutrients that you're getting in? So I have a whole host of things that people should do to get to make sure that they're optimizing their diet. So I don't care if you do keto. I don't care if you do vegetarian or vegan or paleo or whatever. There's a whole host of things in the vertical diet, like we've just talked about, that are necessary for anyone, building a foundation of micronutrients and getting an ample amount of EPA and DHA, getting an adequate amount of sleep, hydrating yourself for exercise. People who become sodium depleted based on outdated recommendations end up with a whole host of problems and headaches and lethargy and the like. So really it's just a host of kind of responsible nutrition advice beyond nutrition, the 10-minute walks, the sleep information, that I think everybody should use regardless of their goal. Yeah, my diet personally always starts with the foundation. I make sure I get an adequate amount of protein. Okay, now my choice is to use a red meat with that, a ruminant, whether it's sheep or bison or deer or cattle. I'll use that to fulfill some of my protein requirements. I'll use whole eggs every day. Again, your collagen, biotin, K2, all the things that are important in whole eggs as part of my protein macronutrient requirement, but very micronutrient dense. Twice a week, I'll make sure and get salmon in, EPA and DHA in salmon. You talked earlier about supplementing with fish oils. Those people who eat 2 5 or 6 ounce servings of salmon a week are getting, I think, all of the EPA and DHA that it's ever been measured to provide any a benefit, and would not need to supplement on top of that. My concern, a lot of people who are trying to just take fish oils, is a couple of things. One, some people use it to manage cholesterol levels or blood sugars. Its major benefit for blood sugars is just that it impairs glucose absorption or digestion in the small intestine.
Things up a little bit.
So that, to me, eat fewer carbs rather than take something that impairs the digestion of the carbs would be a better solution. Plus, it can be a blood thinner. So if you're getting, I'd rather get it from food. And if you're getting a couple servings of salmon or eating some sardines, something like that would be excellent. So I also, beyond that, I'll get some protein from dairy. And I think it's important to get a few servings of dairy.
And cottage cheese.
It could be cottage cheese. I prefer yogurt. Some people can tolerate milk, some can't. Yogurt tends to be more tolerable to people who have some lactose resistance or intolerance. And if they can't do that, then maybe some cheddar cheese, an aged cheese, because it has K2 in it also. So you hear me keep repeating the micronutrients, because that's where I'm focused on, is to make sure that you get a broad array of foods that provide all the micronutrients.
If I couldn't eat cheese, I think I'd just take myself out.
Yeah.
You know how easy it is to sit down with a nice 2-pound block of sharp cheddar cheese and Tabasco sauce and eat the whole goddamn thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
And there's some suggestion, I don't mean to go down too many rabbit holes, but there's some suggestion that the cheese in particular, because of the K2 in cheese, is one of the reasons that France and Switzerland, two of the highest consumers of saturated fats in the world, who have the lowest incidence of cardiovascular disease, they tend to consume a lot of cheese. And it seems that K2 might be one of the critical factors.
That's a real important consideration.
Yeah.
I just like the cheese and the hot sauce.
Yeah. And some of these foods obviously can increase HDLs, which is purported to be the healthy fat. And what we do know from the Framingham study is the people with the higher HDL content had lower cardiovascular disease, even if they had high LDLs.
Yes, it's protective.
Yes, it's protective.
All of the long-term studies, the decent ones, have shown that HDLs is the one you're worried about.
But I think it's specific to the changes that are. We don't know whether it's the chicken or the egg. We don't know if it's protective because of its HDL or because the foods that you eat that raise HDL are creating this protective benefit, meaning that if you try and increase HDL using medication, it doesn't necessarily have the same effect, and those studies have been done as well.
You know, and vitamin D levels are the same thing. There's some evidence that vitamin D levels are just a marker for the circumstances that provide the health benefits and not necessarily the cause of it themselves. Just in case, I like to take some vitamin D, especially in the winter.
Yeah.
I'm outside quite a bit, but...
Well, it's another thing that may benefit insulin sensitivity. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have an adequate vitamin D level, that taking more vitamin D is going to give you more insulin sensitivity. You have to be cautious about, mentioning those kinds of things. People can key on that. Oh, if I take more vitamin D, I'm going to become more insulin sensitive. If you're deficient, if you're in the teens in particular, a lot of the athletes that I've tested, myself too, I've been low at times throughout my career. And when I supplement, when I am low, I notice that I get like my bones ache and I get more fatigue, and I've been trying to lift and I just feel soreness.
Well, and it could very well be that the circumstances that lowered the vitamin D are affecting other variables you're not aware of.
You're right.
And thus the D is the marker.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the leading indicator itself.
So I round out. So I get my protein from a variety of different sources. I think those are the critical sources. It's some eggs and some dairy. And dairy, I didn't mention, but the calcium is hugely important. It's about 1,000 milligrams a day from a food source. If you supplement it, it can be actually detrimental. The cardiovascular disease research suggests it can increase cardiovascular disease as a supplement. It can decrease it as a food source.
Is that associated with any particular form of calcium, or is it?
I don't know specifically. You said calcium supplement on this specific study. I include, if I mention something, the research is included in the vertical diet. I make cautious care to put over 200 references to scientific
carbonate
research.
Carbonate and gluconate are going to be treated differently in the gut. So.
Yeah. Well, calcium people think is just for the bones, but actually it's also for nerve signaling.
Yes.
It's critical for firing of the muscles, as you know, with the troponin and tropomyosin. So, people don't think that vitamin D is related to performance, and it is. And so I want to make sure that, or that calcium is related to performance. Well, and vitamin D as well, because it increases calcium absorption. That's very important. So I make sure and get all of those foods in, and then we're on to vegetables, and I use root tubers that are low FODMAP. Potatoes is a good one, particularly because it's high in potassium. Chasing 4,700 milligrams of potassium a day is hard to do.
It's hard to do without a supplement.
Hard. Yeah, hard to do. And the supplements are tough because they can be hard on the lining of the stomach. And
you think potassium gluconate's a problem?
I don't know specifically. It might be for some people.
I have been taking that stuff for years.
Yeah, if you don't have any problem with it.
People don't understand that you know what? I think the RDA for sedentary people is 3,500 milligram a day. 3.5 grams of potassium is a hell of a lot of potassium.
Yeah.
And the gluconate tablet is 99 milligrams of potassium. You have to take a bunch of it if you're going to supplement like that. Yeah. But it's better to eat a bunch of fruits, vegetables that are high in potassium.
Yeah, I cobbled together a bunch of resources.
Yeah.
There's actually 100 milligrams of potassium for every ounce of meat that you take in. I think salmon's even a little bit higher. And so you can get potassium from the meats that you eat, and salmon. But all potatoes, 1,000 milligrams. I can grab, obviously, fruit. I put that as another item that's on the diet. Every single day I eat fruit. And I know people squawk about seasonal. My wife's from Samoa. There are no seasonal fruits there.
There are no seasons.
Yeah, you have fruit all year round. So I know people squawk about that. And the next thing they squawk about is fructose. And, this has been measured even with fructose. If you don't go over 50 to 100 grams a day, depending on, and you control for calories, there's no difference between fructose and other calories at that level. And fruit seems to be protective beyond that possibly because of the fiber content. But I don't recommend anybody goes over 100 grams a day of sugar anyhow, whether it's from fruit source or not.
Doesn't
I'm just
matter
talking about 2 or 3 pieces of fruit a day, depending on the size of the individual, provides you a ton of potassium, and it's probably not more than 30 grams of actual sugars to begin with. But also, fructose doesn't increase insulin secretion as significantly as regular sugar does.
I didn't think it actually triggered insulin secretion at all. I guess there's probably some degree, just because the flavor.
I'm cautious never to say all. Someone out there will come up with a teeny little insignificant number. But it can actually improve insulin sensitivity as opposed to causing just the opposite problem. So I keep fruits in there. I'll throw some spinach in there. It's low gas. You can get 700 milligrams of potassium from a cup of spinach or 2 cups of spinach. Some people might be exposed
I really miss eating spinach. I had
kidney stone.
I had a kidney stone or 5 back. Oh, that's been. This is 19. That's probably been 15 years ago. And I haven't been eating spinach, but I got on a little kick to where I would get a bag of collard greens.
Yeah.
Get a whole bag of collard greens and eat the whole damn thing. You cook them with bacon grease.
Yeah.
Oh, they're good.
That can be a lot of oxalates, and some
that's just a
people
bunch of oxalate.
can be predisposed to
spinach
stones.
But kale doesn't have a lot of oxalate in it. It doesn't do the same thing. So I eat a lot of kale.
Yeah,
I like kale.
And if you can digest it, that's great. It can be harder for some people to digest kale. It's not
I have
quite
no
as
trouble
easy.
with it at all. I have no trouble digesting spinach. I love that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I haven't thrown a stone in probably 15 years.
Yeah.
And it may be that there were, obviously there were, these things are all multifactorial. You can't ever say, well, it was the collard greens. That's not how things work.
Right.
And I don't know what else was going on at the time, but it could very well be I could get away with it now.
Yeah, they can interact with.
But it doesn't take a lot of kidney stone activity to make a person averse to what they think may be causing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think women laugh at men. Women who've had children laugh at men who claim that kidney stones are painful.
Can't possibly be that bad.
It's all a matter of perspective. Well, I don't. I'm always cautious as I talk through this process that I use to try and find out, how to minimize negative effects and how to get adequate micronutrients. That I don't demonize whole entire food groups or foods in general. They can be good, and again, individualistic, how they're prepared, the dose matters. And I do have a list that I provide of foods that I think can typically cause people problems. And we talked through some of those things today, and particularly with people like performance athletes who have to get in a significant number of carbohydrates a day. If I try and feed that to them in oatmeal, it can be really tough on their stomach. And it has a cumulative effect. You might be able to handle a cup on Monday, but then Tuesday's fine, and then all of a sudden Wednesday, you get bloated, and you don't think it's the oatmeal because you've been eating it for 3 days.
You're not catching up with.
Yeah, the bacteria seems to accumulate to the food that you're eating, and eventually it gets to a point. Same thing's true with something like sugar alcohols. You might be able to tolerate one of those bars that you pick up at an expo, but when you have the second and certainly the third, you're racing to the bathroom.
Yes, you are.
It's sugar alcohol.
Sugar alcohol poisoning.
Yeah. And I even, that can even be in natural foods. Avocado has natural sorbitol. And so some people, depending on their sugar alcohol tolerance, people have different, size buckets that they can tolerate, may not be able to handle 2 avocados, but they can handle 1. Mm-hmm. And so just creating the awareness so that people can look at their foods and understand that certain foods may, in certain quantities and how they're prepared, cause this gas and bloating or aggravate symptoms of IBS. Because it seems that a lot of clients that come to me, whether they're athletes or not, present with digestion problems. They say they have IBS or they have Crohn's or gout or some sort of digestive problem or autoimmune problem that generally results from digestion problems. So I try and mitigate those as best I can. And ultimately, I think it's quite common that folks will implement an elimination diet of some sort. Mm-hmm. Probably the ultimate elimination diet would be like carnivore. You just go down to just eating some red meat, some whole eggs, maybe some salmon.
And by elimination diet, you mean eliminating whole food groups until...
Eliminating everything that could possibly be a trigger. Get down to the foods that you can eat and not have those symptoms, and then start to reintroduce. The reintroduce part's important because we do want some diversity in the diet.
We are omnivores, and an omnivorous diet has been part of the human situation for millions of years. And since that first day we killed something and then ate it, we've been omnivores. Meat's obviously very important. First organized human activity was hunting. Meat has always been supplemented with other types of foods, and that's just what we're designed to digest.
Yeah. And I tend, like some folks may question the fact that I propose that people eat red meat as a priority. Of course, I encourage that we get eggs in every day, that we get dairy in every day, that we get salmon twice a week. But I eat red meat almost exclusively as compared to chicken or turkey.
Do you eat any pork? Because you'd mentioned ruminants earlier. Do you not like
a little
pork,
bit? I don't
or
really
what's wrong
like it.
with pork?
Bacon to me is so high in fat that it tends not to feel well in my digestion. But I'm not opposed to it. But it's not a ruminant, and I don't know that.
You feel like there's something about.
I just think there's something better. If you look at Weston A. Price does talk about some changes in the blood system that may occur from pork. I don't understand it well enough, but because I don't really enjoy pork, and because bacon tastes great, but if I eat bacon, it seems that when I exceed a certain fat level in a meal,
Right.
it even happens when I use too much butter or too much cheese, and I'll get digestion problems. I just don't feel like I stay regular on that.
Right.
So that's just me personally, and so I can make those recommendations to people who also experience the same thing. And not to say those foods are bad, but I think that different people may have different triggers.
Well, it could be that beef is a higher quality protein source than pork, but God, roast pork, nice brown crust of fat on it.
Yeah.
Stan.
But I'm not a fan of the chickens and the turkeys. I just don't think I don't think it gives you the same value as red meat.
And it's not as much fun either.
No.
I mean, if you're going to have chicken and it's going to be fun, it's going to have to be fried chicken.
Yeah. And that's one of the first
Every
things
once
that
in a while.
dieters cut out is red meat, and they prefer to eat chicken because
that is
it's leaner.
silly. That is absolutely silly.
Exactly. I found so much better results in terms of energy level and strength and performance and compliance. I use red meat with all of my athletes, and even those that are dieting. I mentioned 115-pound Nadia Wyatt. We started her out on New York steak.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we wanted to cut calories, we just switched her to top sirloin steak.
Right.
And we wanted to cut a little more calories, we switched her to a top round or a sirloin tip.
Mm-hmm.
She's been eating red meat all the way up to this prep, hasn't done a single second of cardio. She does the 3 10-minute walks after each of 3 meals daily. But she's eating whole eggs. She's eating salmon twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
She's eating fruit. She's salting all of her meals to taste and getting iodine source, which we didn't talk about yet, but also hugely important. If you're going to talk about sodium, you got to talk about iodine in terms of micronutrients. She's held on to more muscle. She's had great energy. Her strength has been great, which is hugely important to me because we talked earlier about people who tend to do a lot of cardio tend to lose a lot of muscle. It's the kind of the wrong stimulus for dieters.
And how many bodybuilders have done their cut with a hour-and-a-half bike every day?
Most of them
Chicken,
still do, and I think it's disgraceful. It's a horrible recommendation. When you start losing muscle, that's not the purpose of that whole competition. But it's
high levels of endurance exposure, long, slow distance. I don't know of a more catabolic event in human existence than a marathon.
Right, yeah. And you could just look at those athletes
those
and tell.
people are just...
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I don't understand. And the media holds up marathon people and triathletes as the
epitome,
pinnacle,
of health.
The pinnacle of health,
Yeah.
the epitome of human well-being.
Yeah.
And those people die. They fall over dead.
Yeah, those enlarged thin hearts.
Those little bitty thin hearts and all that oxidative damage from all of the irritation of the breathing and everything else and running that much oxygen through the system.
Look, I'm cautious, just like I said in the diet. Just like I said about the diet, I'm cautious, not to demonize, but just to talk about the benefits and the potential drawbacks. The same thing here. It's not about comparing one sport to the other necessarily in terms of what you prefer or enjoy doing. I said, what's the best exercise? The one you'll do.
Right.
I've already said the best diet's the one you'll follow.
One you'll follow.
So I wouldn't discourage anybody from running, but I would say that you got to be cautious when you take it to a point of competition. I did a video called "If You Want to Be Healthy, Don't Compete." I don't think that what I did throughout my career was healthy. Getting up to 300 pounds and powerlifting at that weight or dieting down to 5%, you make a lot of sacrifices. I don't think playing football is healthy. I don't think UFC fighting is healthy. I don't think that gymnastics is particularly healthy
God.
for a 9-year-old girl who's had surgeries.
It's so bad. High school wrestling, those people are criminals with those kids, and it's just, walk into the gym and tell a 148-pound kid, I need you at 123.
Yeah. It was terrible.
Next week, I'm telling it's
and all of those sports can be fantastic, but at a competitive level,
I have always said that competition is not about health.
No.
Competition is about winning.
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it. You can take a perfectly healthy exposure to an activity and decide you want to compete in it, and suddenly it becomes a detriment to your health. Yeah. Now, I have always recommended for people's training, just when they're starting training over here in the gym, go ahead and enter a meet, because it makes you more compliant with your training, because you attach some external importance to this, and we've got a meet coming up, and we're not going to miss a workout.
You have a goal.
But at a certain point, when you decide you want to win the Nationals, and you're going to do anything it takes to win the Nationals, then you have made decisions that are not about your health.
Yeah.
Right? And it's
and I talk about that in my
rant. This is true of any sport.
I said if you want to be healthy, don't compete. There's a difference between health and fitness.
Yes.
Being fit doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy, and being healthy, you might not be fit for a particular task. The most important thing I mentioned is that you should do everything you can do to mitigate some of the damage. And that's why I've had blood tests done monthly throughout my career. I've had over 150 blood tests. And so I was able to monitor. And that doesn't mean I didn't make dumb decisions that were focused strictly on winning. But at least I had an idea of what the cost was.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I do mostly with my athletes. It's a reason that I created the diet that I created, is because I thought that the diets they were using were unhealthy. So it's not just for performance, it's actually to improve health. All the foods that I mentioned and the reasons why I use them is to try and mitigate some of the damage that's being done with metabolic adaptation or metabolic syndrome. And I know that some of my athletes are pushing their bodies to their limits. And so I'm behind the scenes getting blood tests for them, making recommendations of things that they should adjust in their nutrition or training to try and mitigate some of the damage. The vitamin D supplementation, the CPAP, a host of other things that we talked about, choline for fatty liver disease. What I'm trying to do is lengthen their competitive career if that's their desire, and optimize their performance.
By mitigating damage.
By mitigating damage,
if nothing else.
Because that's all training is. That's all you do when you're training is break down muscle
stress,
tissue, damage,
recovery,
stress.
adaptation. You're trying to aid in the recovery part of that equation. Yes,
100%.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Stan for a minute. All this stuff is available online, but Stan, where are you from?
Oregon.
Where were you born?
Born and raised Portland, Oregon. I went to Aloha High School. My senior year, graduated from Cambria Heights in Patton, Pennsylvania, tiny little town. I went back and helped my uncle work his farm and take care of my grandfather for a year. So mostly Oregon. I went to the University of Oregon and stayed in Oregon for quite some time before I moved to Seattle and then ultimately now Las Vegas.
What did you do after high school?
I worked. I went to college at the University of Oregon, but I had to pay my own way, and so I got a job as a apartment manager so I could get free rent, and I got a job as a construction guy so I could pay my tuition, and worked evenings and weekends helping build homes and demoing and stuff like that. So it's always been just kind of a long entrepreneurial type life for me.
You've been essentially self-employed for a very long time. Yeah, I have too. It's just it's a bad habit I've acquired, not wanting a boss, thinking I could do it better, I guess. What other things have you done besides, in terms of entrepreneurship, besides the current situation?
Yeah, I worked for other people. I cut my teeth and I learned. I had a good mentor that taught me about real estate. We built multifamily property, and I managed large multifamily property. And then I went on and worked for a $1 billion REIT, a real estate investment trust, and managed a portfolio of properties for them. So I learned a lot about real estate and property management.
You still deal with real estate?
I did for many years.
You're out of it now.
Out of it now, yep. And after I decided to do my own thing, while I was doing the real estate, I was also learning a lot about telecommunications because these communities had their own cable and phone systems.
Oh, really?
And then ultimately, I went and partnered with a friend to run a telecommunications company. I was vice president of a telecommunications company, so I had some good experience there. And with that knowledge, I then went and started my own telecommunications company.
Yeah. Where was this?
And this was up in Washington. And we were just reselling home phone service, and ultimately in 20 states, over 100,000 customers, had over 100 employees, the call center, and we just provisioned phone service for people for a number of years. And during that time, I started buying and selling real estate. I started building single-family subdivisions, bought multifamily properties and converted them and sold them as condominiums, and had some commercial property.
Was that in Washington?
That was in Washington, yeah, pretty much up and down the I-5 corridor there. And then the real estate market collapsed, and I had significant investments in real estate. 07, yeah, right in there. And I was leveraged. I had significant equity in the properties at the former valuation.
Right.
And then, of course, when
that all evaporated.
To the point where, of course, they wanted me to pay down a significant number of loans to get a better debt-to-equity ratio. When I was investing in and building real estate at the time, you could put $1,000 down on a plot of land and get a loan for the entire construction cost and the rest of the land cost. So they were loaning like 99+%.
It's suicidal.
It was crazy.
It's crazy.
When I would buy apartment communities.
No wonder there was a bubble. I mean, and you're aware of the fact. The government decided a long time ago that everybody needed to own a home, which is ridiculous.
They forced the lenders to make these bad loans.
Forced the lenders to make bad loans and then penalize them for making bad loans.
Yeah.
What a bizarre.
And then guaranteed the loans.
Yes, and then guaranteed the loans. When the loans went bad, loans got bundled and sold as bundles of bad loans at a real low rate.
Yeah.
And because we got to do something with all these bad loans. And
it was a disaster, yeah. We lost over $4 trillion in value nationwide in real estate. I lost almost overnight $20 million in equity in those properties.
That's a kick in the balls.
It was terrible. Overnight, we couldn't sell a single thing, obviously, because you couldn't get a lender loan on them.
Right.
But they were loaning, as I mentioned, that when I bought an apartment community, you could buy an apartment community. They would lend you 120% of its value because you would put forth the pro forma that said that you would be able to sell them at this at this new price.
Fiction.
Right. And so they would see this potential profit margin, and they would be lending you more than the current value of the property.
Right.
Yeah.
And then suddenly things got normal again.
Yeah.
And now you need 20% down.
Yeah. And of course, I had been a personal guarantor on those. So the dominoes start falling. Then they want your $2.5 million house, and they want your Rolls Royce, and they want your condo, and they want your. So, everything's backed up against that.
Right.
And so it was a difficult time. Of course, times like that, you read Donald Trump's old book about what he went through in the 80s with his billions of dollars in debt, and it's all interesting. To me, I didn't grow up wealthy. I've been working since I was 8 years old, newspapers, routes, and 7-Eleven, and flipping pizzas, and a whole host of things.
Just like all of us did.
Yeah, it was
like everybody did that is now productive.
Yeah.
Right.
It was monopoly, and I didn't take it personally. It wasn't like I started these businesses aren't my child,
Right.
So I didn't really, it didn't occur to me that this was something that was devastating. It occurred to me that I needed to make some adjustments.
Yeah,
and
this is just a new set of circumstances.
Yeah, you go through a fire sale, you scrape together what you can, and I diverted my attention, started a new company, and within just a few years, we built that into a $5 million a year engineering firm that we ran for a number of years, and that was quite successful. And then we went on and started of course, I did the cooler, which became, as a result of Shark Tank, had a good success. And then now the vertical diet has been very successful for me. Both the meal prep company, we did over $2 million in our first year of gross sales, which, to be honest, is probably just a testimony to the fact that the meals taste great.
Well, is this the company that's making this for you? What percentage of their business is your sales? Do you know? Will they tell you that?
Yeah, I mean, they were a big company. They were probably doing 4 million meals a year. And
Right.
so, we're still a small percentage of their total business, but we're growing, and they're happy about that.
Oh, I bet they are.
Yeah, very pleased. The market is we have a huge recurring, a high percentage of recurring buyers just because of the taste of the meals.
That's why we've reordered hundreds of times.
You can't get a better product than that.
No, it's so good. Those
Yeah.
things I'm going to go eat one here in a minute, I think.
Yeah. And then obviously the vertical diet as a product, the online training and the manual. We've got a book coming out soon. We're developing
What's the book?
The seminars. The book will be
talk
the
about
vertical
the book.
diet again.
Right.
Yeah. Victory Belt Publishing. We signed with them.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna publish the book this coming spring, and we'll have a hard copy. The vertical diet ebook that I've been marketing for about 18 months now has been very successful, and I've since updated it. Originally, it came out as version 1.0, and then I added a whole lot of additional information and research and references, and I put it 2.0. And now I've got even more. I recruited a co-author, is Damon McCune, who's a registered dietitian, PhD in exercise phys, was head of the dietetic department for UNLV. He's an extraordinarily smart guy, and we sat down and we went through the 2.0 extensively, and we found now over 200 peer-reviewed, published research articles, and I also include a lot of references to just regular articles and videos.
So now it's got a bibliography.
It absolutely, and it's supported all of the because as you know, you're always going to get somebody that's going to cry out that that's not factual, and in fact it is.
The fact that there's no peer-reviewed study on it doesn't mean it's not factual.
Correct.
It just means that someone has failed to ask the question yet.
Right.
I mean, see that quite a bit.
So we put out the 3.0, and we gave the 3.0 for free to anybody who'd bought a previous version. So it's kind of a living document, and everything that I learn along the way, as I have my entire life, by seeking out some of the best knowledge in the industry and utilizing what I think of that knowledge worked for me, and then utilizing it with my clients. I think I have a responsibility for them to stay current and to give them effective information. Then I'll just continue to upgrade it in that way and make it a living document.
Stan, you're almost 51. What have you learned about training in the 40 years? What have you learned about training that goes back to conventional wisdom being wrong?
Yeah, well, I don't know how it compares to conventional wisdom, but I know when I started, I was training way too much and eating way too little. I was using the chicken breast and rice cakes because that's what the guy behind the counter at Gold's Gym was eating.
Right.
And I was training 7 days a week, 2 hours a day, because that's what the Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia Bodybuilding told you to do.
Right.
Was to get in there and do 77 sets for each body part twice a day. So I did all of that, and it was a hard slog. You get a lot of, here you are, a 19-year-old kid with tendinitis.
Yep.
Trying to figure out how that happened.
I understand that.
Yeah.
God.
So once I learned
overtraining is a problem
it's huge.
for committed people.
Once I learned to flip the script on that, I started was able to start growing much better. I started focusing more on food and sleep and less on injuring myself.
Right.
I learned that it's a stimulus. That stimulate, don't annihilate. I did spend a lot of years training very hard, pushing myself, in that gray area, as you have to do if you're going to compete. But I did have the opportunity to work with, I mentioned in 2009 with Flex Wheeler, who completely changed my thoughts. I actually pulled squats and deadlifts out of my routine, as Dorian did historically, because I was so strong in those powerlifting movements, and a lot of that was mostly leverage and a lot of glutes.
Yeah.
And that wasn't necessarily the best thing for bodybuilding.
Right.
And so once I started really focusing more on the muscles, going through greater ranges of motion, not using quite as heavy of weights that would create so much fatigue, but in particular on my lumbar spine, which caused my delayed onset muscle soreness to extend. So I pulled back from that, and Flex had us mostly working on, just not damaging the body as much, and more volume, more frequency. Lots of food, I mentioned earlier, is the way we trained there. I also learned that the manner in which I dieted and the manner in which I gained weight, both to lose weight and gain weight, made a huge difference on the outcomes. I mentioned previously that when I over-restricted and I took out red meat, and I took out salt, and I took out fruit, and I took out dairy, and I took out carbs, I got smaller and weaker and more tired. And when I fixed that problem, I didn't get smaller and weaker and more tired. And I still lost all the body fat and got shredded. And I learned when I was bulking that the gallon of milk a day thing probably works for a 19-year-old, but as you age,
that's who it's for.
Yeah, it weighs on you quickly.
19-year-old novice is who it's for.
And the pizza pasta pancakes thing made me fatter, not stronger. When I was at the world's strongest pro bodybuilder in 2010, I was 310 pounds, and I was not any stronger than I was at 274. And that was a problem. But I was fatter. I had terrible blood work because, I tested my blood a month out and the day after. I had a habit of doing that. I wanted to see the worst damage I could possibly do to myself. So I learned a lot of lessons along the way, and I encourage folks to kind of step back and take a longer look at their objective. A lot of folks are just got this 3-month plan going, and then it's just caution to the wind to reach that 3-month goal.
Right.
When I went up to a seminar with Mikhail Koklev, I mentioned some years ago, and Boris Shako was up there. They make 5-year plans and sometimes longer, and they don't.
Advanced athletes, Olympic athletes often work on a quadrennium, and that's an advanced athlete.
Yeah. And so I would encourage folks to learn some of the lessons that I learned and apply them now, particularly the guys that are too heavy and haven't had gains in a little while. It might be time to diet back down. You can go back up, do it right, apply the same program that I implemented with Hofthor. That's important. I also found that as I aged, both the frequency, the volume, and the load had to start decreasing, particularly for powerlifting.
Yes.
When I started to get up north of 700-800 pound squats, I couldn't do that twice a week.
It doesn't take that many 800-pound squats.
No.
To produce sufficient stress to cause an adaptation.
When I was my strongest, it was when I was the time I was training with Mark Bell back in 2009 and forward. I would squat 1 week, I would deadlift the next. I was squatting twice a month.
Right.
Deadlifting twice a month.
It's basically what I do now.
And that was it, and especially being over 40. And I would also employ a whole host of recovery techniques outside of the gym. I talked about the fact that it's what I did outside the gym that made me more successful, not what I did inside the gym. Lots of guys lifted much the same way as I did and trained as often and possibly as heavy and possibly as hard. There's certainly plenty of examples of that. What I did outside the gym in order to set world records and beat those other guys was I had a lot more discipline and consistency with my sleep and my recovery and my nutrition, obviously. But I would say squat really heavy on a Sunday, and I had a recumbent bike in my room. At the time, I was staying at a hotel room when I was training at Mark Bell's, and I stayed there for 2 months while I worked with him. And previous to that, I'd stayed in a hotel room for 3 months while I worked with Flex. That's all I did was eat, sleep, and train, which is, I did a video called Why I'm a Hypocrite, because I was afforded that opportunity. I'd been successful in business. I had the time. I had the resources.
It's nice work if you can get it.
Yeah. But what I did it's key, and it's one of the reasons I've kind of landed on this whole 10-minute walk thing, which I preach every chance I get because it's extraordinary for many, many reasons, compliance being the main one. Is that I would ride that bike. What I found is if I squatted on Sunday and then I laid around all day Monday and Tuesday trying to recover, I wouldn't recover. I was just sore all the time, sore. And even if I went to a chiropractor and got electric stem or a massage, it does nothing.
Nothing.
Does nothing. Your perceived soreness may go down, but there's no physiological measurement that it provides any benefit. And this has been studied. I'll go beyond my opinion.
It's real damned expensive to do that too.
And it could be even damaging if somebody starts to do deep tissue. I mean, it just start compounding the problem. Anyhow, without getting off on that rant, I would ride that bike 3 times. I would get up in the morning and I would do a 10-minute HIIT session, 30 seconds with a little bit of tension, kind of fast, and rest for 30 seconds. And I would do that 10 times. It took me a total of 10 minutes.
Right.
But I had a little pump. I was called like a baby pump. I would get up off the bike and I would feel like I had just kind of worked out my legs. But I didn't. It's all concentric loading. There's no eccentric damage. It's not significant. But I pumped a ton of blood through there, which is really the key thing.
Probably do the same thing with a prowler if there was a way to do it inside conveniently.
Yep, concentric. And I did that 3 times a day. Frequency matters in this. That's why I like the 3 10-minute walks is better than one 30-minute session. Frequency matters. You get the blood flowing through there, get all those nutrients in there. As you know, the joints, the synovial joints, to get oxygen into the cartilaginous structures, you have to have some sort of movement. And that's not happening through osmosis. Maybe 10% of it can move through osmosis, I suppose, through the gradient. But if you want to move oxygen into those joints, because they're not innervated with capillaries like muscles are, then you need to move, and the movement is what's going to help provide the nutrition to that. So I believe in movement.
Infuses things, even if there's even in the absence of a vascular bit.
Yes.
Right.
And I've also found that things you do that are done to you or for you are not as effective as things you do for yourself. And another example of that is when Eric Spoto got his shoulder surgery, they sent him home with this machine that moved his arm around. And it turns out now from researching that over many years, because they thought that would be better than just the sedentary, it's not as effective as if you move it yourself. The machine that moves your arm for you is not as effective.
Isn't that astonishing?
Yeah.
Isn't that astonishing?
Crazy.
Passive motion is not as good as active motion and muscle contraction and voluntary.
100%. And as you know,
when I had my knee surgery, I woke up in what was called a constant passive motion CPM machine that just moved the joint through the range of motion. And I understand the point of doing that, because you don't want the thing to start to freeze up and everything else. But why was I not encouraged to do that same movement myself?
Yeah.
You know, I could have done it myself. I mean, the range of motion is obviously there.
Yep.
Right?
And that's one of the reasons that my 89-year-old dad had a hip surgery, and the very next morning he's up walking on a walker. They want you to move.
Yeah, they've gotten better. This is 25 years ago when I had this knee surgery.
Even prior to that, the passive movement isn't as good as the active movement. But prior to passive movement, they were icing the hell out of it. They were using those game readies. Remember, they were putting those. They were packing them onto somebody's leg, and they were pumping ice in and contracting, and those would impair recovery. You use too much of those too often, and
you're gonna. You know, there's two schools of thought on that. The one is that the cold constricts just because of the temperature, constricts blood flow and reduces swelling. The other school of thought on there is that the body, in an attempt to warm the tissue up, flushes. Yeah, and you can see the flush on the skin if you ice your knee, but I don't know what's happening at depth. Ice has been revealed to be less than useful therapy on just everything except a torn muscle belly.
Didn't the guy who invented rice say he wishes he hadn't put ice in there? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. In fact, because it doesn't do anything. If you've got a torn muscle belly, ice is real good for that. Yeah. But ice, how many years did we ice our knees? Yeah. And it didn't do a goddamn thing.
Well, and
you know,
to wrap
ice your shoulder, ice your elbow. That was what we were encouraged to do, and it didn't work.
I did that for years. I had tendonitis in my knees for 10 years, and
ice didn't do anything for it.
When I applied this more movement, then I recovered faster, and I applied the same thing to my knee recovery, just like we just talked about with using banded leg presses, sometimes twice, 3 times a day. I was going out and just using just a band and doing this 10-minute, whether it was recumbent bike or the 10-minute pressing with a band, not creating any damage or pain, but just pumping a ton of blood in there, just moving, tons and tons of blood. I had chronic tendonitis in my knees for over 10 years, the kind where I couldn't sit in an airplane without just massive pain. It would throb at night. I injected just about everything you can imagine into those knees, from prolotherapy to
platelet-rich plasma.
Yes, BRP, TB 500, BPC 157, you name it. I probably got more benefit from just the needle jab than I did from
just the physical disruption.
Yeah, everything else that went in there. But nonetheless, it never healed. And I did a rant recently on keys to pain-free knees, where I talked about the fact that now I have no pain in my knees from implementing these methods of just pumping tons and tons and tons of blood in there with frequency, consistently over a period of time. And now I'm walking out and squatting 600 pounds for reps with no knee wraps or sleeves, and I've absolutely no knee pain at all, which is completely.
I would enjoy that. Yeah. We'll have to talk more about that later. Well, what do you think about volume recommendations for old guys. If you were going to train your dad, in fact, you are training your dad.
I do.
What do you have him doing?
Yeah, he's
89 and
89 years old. I got him a little mechanical chair that goes up like this, and then he'll stand up and sit down. That's his squat.
Mm-hmm.
I got him a little block that might only
What does he do, sets and reps, though?
Maybe I try and encourage him not to do it every day. Try and encourage him to do it maybe 3 times a week.
Right.
And just a couple of sets. Just a
couple sets of 5.
Yeah.
3.
Couple sets of 5, 3 to 5. I do the same thing. I have a little block that I set up next to a table that he can hold on to, and he steps up on the block. I like to see his legs go through a little bit of a range of motion.
Right.
So at his age, he can't get down on the floor, and he can't obviously do too much.
Mm-hmm.
I also have him pick something up that's heavy. I have a little rack deadlift set up.
Right.
Because of the axial loading, I want to see the bone mineral density being
Yes,
stimulated.
sure.
In addition to the strength benefit, obviously the studies on elderly people, those who have the strongest grip live the longest.
Right.
And
that's just a proxy for total body strength.
Yeah,
I
muscle,
don't think
sarcopenia.
Those studies have been misinterpreted so many times. It's just amazing what these people are trying not to see.
Yeah. They should be building muscle tissue.
Yes.
They should be lifting
Yes.
as to whatever degree they can safely, as long as they can.
Right. Using the most muscle mass over the longest effective range of motion.
Yeah. And then the little block, he does step-ups on the block in front of the table. So that's pretty much it. I have a band set up tied to a post, and so when he watches TV, he can do band work with his upper body.
Yeah,
This is
that's
band work. And so I keep him moving, but not a lot. I tell him that recovery is more important. It's just a stimulus, and so we do a couple sets of 5, and just the consistency to me is what's most important. I had to dramatically decrease my volume as I aged, and my frequency.
Right.
As I aged, particularly for powerlifting.
I've gone to triples instead of 5s, and this may just be a matter of laziness, but I just don't like being sore anymore. I'm 63, and when I was in my 30s, being sore was cool, but now it's not as the romance is gone, and I have trouble sleeping anyway, and I just find that 3s are easier for me to recover from. They don't make me so sore. They don't keep me up at night, and they're every bit as effective as 5s for a guy my age.
100% agree. Yeah. If you're, particularly as you age, I think that people overemphasize the value of the soreness. It's not the leading driver of
the soreness
hypertrophy
has got
or strength.
nothing to do with hypertrophy. I just got through writing an article about that. I see people with these bands on their wrists, like the Lance Armstrong Live Strong thing, that say Live Sore, and that may be a brand that I may be impugning. But look, living sore is a stupid idea.
Yeah.
If you're pursuing soreness for its own sake, you are pursuing inflammation for its own sake, and that is an incredibly stupid thing to do.
Yeah.
There's nothing that eats a person up as fast as chronic systemic inflammation.
I agree.
This is what's wrong with the marathon.
Yeah.
And if you are sore all the time, bad things happen to people who are sore all the time. If soreness is the purpose of the workout, this is one of the primary problems with CrossFit, as far as I'm concerned, is that it rewards soreness. These people get used to thinking that soreness is the prize, that all the skin ripped off your distal palm is the prize, and that this is the end that we're trying to do. We're trying to get sore, and soreness doesn't make you strong. Lifting a little bit more weight and recovering from it, and then lifting a little bit more weight and recovering from that, and doing it again makes you stronger. And that process may not involve any soreness.
I totally agree, and I don't pursue that anymore. And even though sometimes I lift what some people would perceive to be pretty heavy, I'm not limping around for 3 days after that.
Right.
Anymore. I'm certainly able to handle those loads. It's only heavy in comparison to the average 50-year-old person, but it's not heavy in comparison to what I used to do.
Unadapted eccentric loading causes soreness.
Yeah.
And there's no better way to get sore than 100 air squats. And there's also no better way to get weaker than 100 air squats.
Yeah.
But
that's another point.
People enjoy doing it in large
That's
groups.
a good point that you made there, is that I'm busy. Most people are pretty busy. They've got kids, they've got work, etc. So I don't like exercising that doesn't return something to me. I like training.
Right.
I like to get something out of it. And if you're just going to the gym and going through the motions and you're not actually
training,
getting stronger,
Right.
building muscle tissue, which is
going through the process of programming a strength increase.
yeah, and this is even for folks who aren't trying to compete in something. If
Right.
they want to at least maintain muscle tissue while they're dieting, and optimally they'll just try and build muscle tissue because it'll increase their basal metabolic rate and it'll improve their insulin sensitivity and glucose absorption. So those things are critical. It's one of the key ways they can build a bigger engine long term. And I don't like to do frivolous things. And so people, when I talk about cardiovascular fitness, I'm cautious about what I recommend and why. Because why do you do cardio? Because for cardiovascular fitness, well, how do we measure that?
Squats do that.
Exactly.
Squats.
That's
do that.
the point.
You
can
poor
increase
things
your
don't
VO2
understand
max.
that a set of 5 squats is hard in terms of cardiovascular.
Yes.
They don't understand that because they've never done it
You can
themselves.
get an equivalent increase in VO2 max. You can get your 7 or 8 METs of your metabolic equivalence, which is probably, what is that, equivalent of a 13-minute mile? It's not too extraordinary
No.
to be able to garner all of the health benefits that you can from an efficient cardiovascular system that you could stimulate with the kind of work, like you mentioned there, squats, that also gives you...
That also increases your strength.
Increases your strength. It's a better return on your investment.
It is.
I
Absolutely.
never would assign someone, and when I do seminars, I ask other trainers to please consider, when you're giving somebody a 40-minute treadmill assignment, first of all, what's the effectiveness of that? It's not been proven to be very effective for weight loss.
No. Oh, no.
And secondly, what's the long-term outcome there? What's the compliance of that? Nobody does that for any extended period of time. And so the only benefit would be cardiovascular fitness. Could you get that from an alternate exercise that would give you additional benefit using less time? And then I just encourage that the 10-minute walks, the 3 10-minute walks, would provide you all of the cardiovascular benefit that you need. It's sustainable. You can do it anywhere, anytime. I do them when I travel at the airport, or I walked around the hotel this morning for 10 minutes before I came over.
Right.
You can, walk your kids to school. It's always something that anybody could do anytime, but it provides the added benefit, in particular, of the frequency that I mentioned, rather than one 40-minute session at the end of the day.
Right.
Of the blood sugar improvements, because it's twice as effective as using metformin. These researches have been done as well. If you walk after a meal, it's twice as effective as lowering blood sugars and decreasing the onset of type 2 diabetes as metformin. The number one prescribed drug for diabetes is twice as effective as taking 3 10-minute walks. So it's crazy that kind of thing shouldn't be recommended in preference to cardiovascular fitness. And this isn't I'm not squawking about comparing weightlifting to jogging. It's not what this is about. This is about understand what it's for, what you're getting out of it, and how does a busy professional and individual get the best return out of their investment on the least time put in, because they don't have the kind of time that we in the fitness industry do. We can train every day, all day if we want to. That's our job. But they can't. And as I've gotten busier and busier, I've tried to figure out how little can I possibly do while still maximizing my cardiovascular fitness, maximizing my strength with the least investment. And it's just a matter of consistency. I use lower volume, obviously, but those are some of the key things, I think, to get across to the average population.
Right. Stan, thanks for being here. Stan came to our seminar in San Diego earlier this year, and it was wonderful to have Stan there at the seminar, because everybody in the room knew who he was, and Stan is a perfect gentleman. There are a lot of guys as well known as he is that are pricks, and Stan went out of his way to be friendly and inclusive to everybody in the room. And it's just, he's just a great guy, he's just a regular great guy, and I really appreciate him saying nice things about us and showing up to do this podcast. And I hope you'll appreciate the resource that he provides you. go to the Your website is
StanEfferding.com.
StanEfferding.com.
Instagram's at Stan Efferding. YouTube, Stan Efferding. It's great to have an
It's
original
easy to
name.
remember that.
Nobody else wants that name, but I got it.
It's easy to remember, too.
Yeah.
So do that. Get the book.
I got to say, before you wrap up here, about that seminar, I've spent my entire career reaching out and trying to get the best information I can from the most knowledgeable people. I've trained with some of the, famous, Eddie Cohn, Flex Wheeler, Charles Glass, Mark Bell, legends. And also in terms of education, I studied exercise science at the University of Oregon. I told you I spent a year dissecting cadavers. I studied physics and kinesiology, and I thought I knew a lot. And I've always thought I knew a lot, but I also knew there was a whole lot I didn't know. And so I've spent my entire career, and now even that I'm retired and I'm helping others, I'm going out, I'm trying to find the best information out there. And I was very glad that I bought your book, I read your book, I went to your seminar. I learned a lot at your seminar from your coaches who also teach us how to coach, which was awesome. Right. I became a better coach, became a better lifter from learning some things from you. The amount of detail that you went through, which really challenged what I thought I knew about physics and kinesiology and how to apply it to lifting, was extraordinary. And so for those folks who haven't attended your seminar, if someone like me who spent my entire life studying and applying, lifting and would learn as much as I did, which I think has now contributed to my being so healthy. My joints and stuff now are even better, and I'm able to do overhead presses as a result of you. I had a torn rotator cuff that and watching the way that you set up your hands. Now I've been able to also help others. I send them your videos and show them if you've got a torn little tiny rotator cuff and you can't move your arm, that your major muscles are going to start to atrophy and the thing's just going to be constant pain. If you can get those major muscles strong again by utilizing an exercise in the right fashion that'll allow your rotator cuff not to be injured while you're lifting, I now can actually lift my arm up that I couldn't do for a number of years as a result of coming here. There's just endless examples of things that I learned. I hate to belabor the point, but I think people should know that the information is extraordinary, and it was such a great opportunity for me, and now I'm utilizing that information. When somebody contacts me and asks me about their squat, I send them a starting strength video. I said, study this, then send me your squat, and I'll give you some feedback. Because I couldn't do it any better.
Right.
Yeah. So
well, that's quite an endorsement, Stan. I certainly appreciate it. Again, StanEfferding.com. E-book's available now. Get the e-book. Get a hard copy to keep in the bathroom. All right. Most people get a lot of reading done in there. And put one in there. Buy two of them. Put one in the bathroom and put one in your gym bag. All right. Those will be available soon. Stan, thank you.
Thanks
again. And we thank you for being here for Starting Strength Radio. We'll see you next time.